An ordinary woman working a quiet restaurant shift loses her patience when a spoiled little girl causes a scene. Out of frustration, she slaps the girl's hand, unaware that this single act ties her fate to the most dangerous family in the city. The clinking of silverware and the soft hum of chatter filled Il Sogno, the small Italian restaurant tucked between a florist shop and a crumbling pawn store on the outskirts of Boston. The place was unassuming, dimly lit with strings of warm bulbs overhead, a quiet refuge for couples seeking privacy and regulars who enjoyed the comfort of familiar faces. For Emma Rivera, it was just another Tuesday shift. She moved from table to table with practiced ease, her black apron tied snugly at the waist, her dark curls pulled into a messy bun that was already loosening after hours of work. Emma wasn't known for losing her temper. Not anymore. Life had taught her restraint, the kind born from surviving too much. A messy divorce at 28, a mother's lingering illness, the weight of bills that stacked like bricks around her small apartment. She breathed through it all, smiled for customers, kept her hands steady even when her heart wasn't. But that night something cracked. The girl had come in with her nanny, no more than 6 or 7 years old, dressed like a porcelain doll in a velvet burgundy dress, white tights, and tiny designer shoes that probably cost more than Emma's entire paycheck. Her hair was silky and dark, tied in 2 bows, her eyes sharp and watchful. At first she had been quiet, coloring on a menu with a crayon while the nanny fussed over her phone. Then came the tantrum. The girl demanded gelato. "Chocolate, not vanilla, or I'll scream." The nanny tried to soothe her, but the girl smacked the woman's hand away, knocking a glass of water across the table. The crash drew glances from nearby diners. Emma hurried over, her smile thin, her patience already stretched. She crouched to wipe the water, her knees pressing against the tiled floor when the little girl shoved the crayons toward her. "Clean it," she ordered, as if Emma were not a human being but the help in some mansion. Emma bit her tongue. She told herself, "She's just a child, children act out, don't make it worse." She nodded, keeping her voice soft. "Of course, sweetheart, but be careful with your things, okay?" The girl scowled. Then, as Emma leaned closer to gather the wet napkins, a tiny hand darted toward the tray of freshly plated cannoli. Emma was about to serve to another table. Quick, greedy fingers reaching for powdered sugar and cream. Something in Emma snapped. Before she could think, her hand moved on instinct. A sharp slap across the child's fingers. Not cruel, not brutal, but firm enough to sting. The sound echoed louder than she meant it to, silencing the chatter around them. The little girl gasped. Her dark eyes widened, not with tears but with shock, the kind of shock that comes when someone dares to cross an invisible line. She pulled her hand back as if burned, staring at Emma with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Don't touch what isn't yours," Emma said quietly, her voice trembling with the weight of frustration. The nanny froze, color draining from her face. Her phone slipped to the table with a soft clatter. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her lips pale as though she'd witnessed something far more dangerous than a simple slap. The girl didn't cry. She didn't wail. Instead, she smiled, a slow, eerie little curve of her lips that made Emma's stomach knot. "You're going to regret that," the child whispered, almost sing-song before popping a sugar cube from the table into her mouth. Emma blinked. The words chilled her, though she brushed it off as childish spite. Children say cruel things when their pride is hurt. She stood, smoothed her apron and forced her voice steady. "Your dessert will be out soon. Please, sit nicely." She hurried away, but whispers rippled through the restaurant. Diners glanced at her with pity, some with disapproval. The nanny avoided her eyes entirely, and the little girl, she simply sat back in her chair, swinging her legs, eyes locked on Emma like a predator memorizing its prey. The rest of the shift dragged under the weight of those eyes. Emma found herself dropping forks, forgetting orders, her hands trembling in ways she couldn't explain. By the time the child left, hand in hand with her pale, silent nanny, Emma exhaled with relief. She told herself it was nothing, just another spoiled kid, just another shift. But when she stepped outside hours later, the autumn air sharp in her lungs, she noticed something unsettling. A black SUV idled across the street, windows tinted too dark to see through. Its engine purred softly, patient, watching. Emma wrapped her jacket tighter, hurrying down the cracked sidewalk toward the bus stop. She didn't look back. She didn't want to. Inside her chest, however, a seed of unease took root, a small voice whispering, "You shouldn't have touched her. You have no idea who she was." And Emma didn't. Not yet. But that slap had already changed everything. Emma thought she had left the unease behind with last night's shift, but the moment she stepped into Il Sogno the following morning, the restaurant no longer felt the same. The air was thicker, heavy with a silence that didn't belong to a place usually filled with clinking glasses and the hiss of simmering garlic in olive oil. Two of her co-workers huddled near the espresso machine, whispering. Their voices dropped when she entered. The dishwasher, normally cheerful and quick with jokes, avoided her eyes completely, scrubbing at plates with unusual ferocity. Emma frowned. She tied her apron, smoothed the fabric with her palms, and forced herself to ignore it. Paranoia. She was tired. The slap had unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. But then she saw the manager. Mr. Klein was a man who never strayed from his script, always cheerful, always a salesman. This morning, however, he looked pale. His balding head glistened with sweat, his smile brittle as glass. "Emma," he said too quickly. "Good. You're here. Busy day. Lots of reservations. Let's all keep things smooth, okay?" The way he hovered near her all morning, checking tables she served, wringing his hands, only deepened the knot in her stomach. By lunch, she realized why. The door opened with the sharp chime of the bell, and two men walked in. They didn't belong. Their suits were dark, tailored, too expensive for this side of Boston. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other lean with slicked-back hair and eyes like polished stone. Neither smiled. The restaurant stilled as if the oxygen had been sucked out. Conversations died mid-sentence, forks paused mid-air. Even the chef poked his head from the kitchen, then retreated instantly. Emma froze with a tray of drinks in her hands. The men scanned the room, their gazes methodical, predatory, before one of them spoke to Mr. Klein. His voice carried, low but commanding. "We're looking for someone." Mr. Klein's smile wavered. "Of course. Anything I can do?" The taller man produced a photo from his jacket. Emma didn't see the image, but she saw the way Mr. Klein's throat bobbed when he swallowed, the way his eyes darted toward her, and then away just as quickly. Emma's pulse hammered. She shifted the tray to keep her trembling hands steady, telling herself she was imagining it. People ask questions all the time, but when the man's gaze finally landed on her, sharp, cutting, unblinking, she knew. They weren't here for anyone else. The shorter one approached her slowly, like a wolf circling prey. He didn't speak right away, only studied her face. Then he smiled, and the expression chilled her more than a scowl would have. "You work here?" he asked. Emma nodded, her throat dry. "Yes, sir. Can I get you a table?" "No," he said softly, almost kindly. "Just your name." Her mouth opened, then closed. Every instinct screamed, "Don't answer." But silence felt dangerous too. "Emma. Emma Rivera." The man repeated it, tasting the syllables. "Emma Rivera." He glanced back at his partner, who gave a slight nod as if confirming something. Then, without another word, they left. The bell chimed again. The SUV outside swallowed them whole, and they were gone. But the restaurant remained frozen as if time itself hadn't resumed. Everyone's eyes slid to her, careful, pitying, afraid. Emma felt her knees weaken. She retreated to the back, pressing herself against the cool tile wall of the storage room, her chest rising in shallow breaths. That was when the dishwasher, sweet, young Michael, slipped in behind her, shutting the door. His eyes darted to make sure they were alone before he whispered, "Emma, you don't know, do you?" She shook her head. "Know what?" "The girl." He swallowed hard, voice shaking. "The one you hit." That was Sophia Romano. Emma's brow furrowed. "Romano?" Michael's voice dropped even lower, his hands trembling as he wrung the rag in his fingers. "Her father, Antonio Romano, they call him Il Re Nero, the Black King. He runs half this city. Drugs, shipping, gambling, construction, doesn't matter. If it makes money, it's his. People who cross him don't just disappear, they vanish like they never existed." The blood drained from Emma's face. She leaned against the wall, the words hitting her like blows. "Mafia. Boss. The Black King. No," she whispered. "She's just a kid." Michael's eyes were wide with panic. "A kid who carries his blood. You don't understand. Touching her is like spitting on his crown. He'll know. He already knows. Emma shook her head, desperate. It was nothing. Just her hand. She was about to ruin... Michael grabbed her wrist harder than he meant to. Emma, listen to me. Get out. Leave town. Quit. Do whatever you have to, because when Romano decides someone owes him, they pay. Always. Emma pulled her hand back, heart racing, but even as fear clawed at her, a stubborn thought rose. She was just a child, and I was just doing my job. Still, when she returned to the floor and caught sight of the empty street through the restaurant's window, her breath hitched. The black SUV was back, engine idling, waiting. Emma barely slept that night. Every creak of her apartment, every passing car, every shadow across the window felt like a warning. She kept seeing the girl's eyes, wide, dark, unflinching, and hearing that whisper, "You're going to regret that." By dawn, exhaustion had left her hollow-eyed. She sipped coffee that tasted like ash, pulling her jacket tighter as she prepared for another shift she wasn't sure she could face. But she didn't make it to the bus stop. A black SUV was waiting at the curb, sleek and still as a predator in the early morning fog. Emma froze on the stoop, her heart punching against her ribs. Two men stepped out, the same ones who had come to Il Sogno the day before. No words, no threats, just a silent gesture toward the open door. Emma's first instinct was to run, her second was to scream, but both died under the weight of their gaze. These weren't men you said no to. They were men who collected obedience like others collected spare change. With trembling legs, she climbed inside. The SUV's interior smelled of leather and expensive cologne, faintly mixed with gun oil. Her breath fogged the tinted glass as the car pulled away, swallowing the city streets in its wake. She clutched her bag to her chest like a shield, her nails biting into the fabric. No one spoke. The silence was louder than any threat. After what felt like forever, the SUV rolled through iron gates and up a long, winding drive lined with trimmed hedges and looming statues. At the top sat a mansion. Not the gaudy kind of wealth Emma expected, but something colder. Italianate, stone walls weathered and heavy, windows like watchful eyes. A fortress masquerading as a home. The men ushered her inside. The foyer was vast, ceilings arching high above, a chandelier dripping light like icicles. Portraits lined the walls, not family photos, but oil paintings of stern men in suits, their gazes sharp, unyielding. The air smelled faintly of cigar smoke and polished wood, and then she saw him, Antonio Romano. He stood near a grand piano, his suit perfectly cut, his presence filling the room even though he hardly moved. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair streaked with threads of silver that only made him look more dangerous. His face bore the kind of lines carved not by age, but by choices, ruthless ones. His eyes, though. His eyes were not what she expected. They were dark, yes, but not empty. They carried weight, sorrow tucked beneath steel, like a storm restrained by glass. He dismissed the men with a flick of his hand. The room emptied, leaving Emma alone with him. Her knees nearly buckled under the silence. "You're Emma Rivera," he said at last, his voice deep, smooth, with a quiet authority that left no room for doubt. Emma swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." His gaze lingered on her face, unreadable. "My daughter told me about you." The words were deceptively calm, but they sliced through Emma like a blade. Her mouth opened. Apology, explanation, excuse, she wasn't sure, but he raised one hand, silencing her. "She told me you struck her." Emma's pulse thundered. She wanted to scream that it was only her hand, that she hadn't meant harm, that the girl had been reaching for food not meant for her, but under that gaze, excuses shriveled. I did," she whispered. "I didn't think. She was about to—" "Enough!" The word cracked through the room like a gunshot. His eyes narrowed, but his tone did not rise. If anything, it became quieter, more dangerous. "No one touches my daughter." Emma's breath caught. This was it. She imagined the SUV waiting outside, a shallow grave in some forgotten wood. She thought of her mother, her debts, all the things she'd never fix. Her vision blurred with panic. But then, to her shock, his expression shifted. He exhaled slowly, pressing his thumb to his temple as if fighting some inner battle. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "And yet," he murmured, almost to himself, "she smiled when she told me." Emma blinked, not understanding. "She said," Antonio continued, his gaze finally locking with hers, "that you are the first person who's ever told her no, that you made her feel ordinary." His lips curved, not quite a smile, more like a shadow of one. She liked it. The room tilted around Emma. She couldn't tell if this was reprieve or a deeper trap. I didn't mean—" Antonio stepped closer, the air tightening with his presence. "You acted on instinct. You treated her like a child, not a princess in a glass cage. That, Miss Rivera, is rare." Emma's heart hammered so loudly she was sure he could hear it. She expected threats, punishment, maybe worse. Instead, his next words shattered her expectations completely. "You will come work for me," he said. Her lips parted. "Work? For you?" He nodded once. "As Sophia's caretaker. Full-time. Effective immediately." Emma stumbled back, shaking her head. "No, I can't. I already have a job. His eyes hardened. "You no longer do. From this moment forward, your life belongs to my daughter's well-being. That is not a request." Emma's stomach dropped. She searched his face for some trace of mercy, but found only inevitability. "I'm not qualified," she whispered, desperate. I barely held it together at the restaurant." Antonio leaned in, his voice low, intimate, the kind that left no air between them. "You are qualified because she wants you. And what my daughter wants, she gets." Emma's breath caught. There was no escape. Not from this man, not from his world. And as he turned away, signaling for his men to return, Emma realized with bone-deep dread her fate had been sealed not by a slap, but by a smile. The Romano mansion looked different in daylight. The stone wall still loomed like a fortress, but the gardens were alive with roses and fountains, softening the edges of the empire Antonio Romano ruled. Emma felt out of place as she was led inside, carrying nothing but a small duffel bag, her entire life crammed into a few clothes, a photo of her mother, and a half-read paperback. Her room was on the second floor, large, sunlit, too elegant for her. A canopy bed, French windows that overlooked the garden, and shelves already filled with books and toys that didn't belong to her. Someone had prepared it, as if her arrival had been inevitable. "You'll be across from Sophia's suite," a housekeeper explained in a clipped accent, avoiding Emma's eyes. "She wakes early. She likes hot cocoa before breakfast. You will attend to her first." Emma nodded, her throat tight. The door clicked shut behind the woman, leaving her alone. For a moment she sank onto the edge of the bed, pressing her hands into her lap. She should have run when she had the chance, should have packed a bag and vanished before the SUV pulled up that morning. But it was too late now. The sound of tiny footsteps broke her spiral. Emma looked up to find Sophia in the doorway. The little girl stood in her velvet dress again, hair neatly brushed, a doll dangling from her fingers. Her gaze was sharp, too knowing for a child her age. "You came," Sophia said simply. Emma hesitated. "Yes, I came." The girl padded in, climbing onto the bed without asking. She plucked Emma's paperback from the nightstand and flipped through the pages carelessly. "Daddy said you live here now." Emma's stomach knotted. "It seems that way." Sophia's lips twitched in something like amusement. "Good. Everyone else is boring." She dropped the book, tilting her head. "Why did you hit me?" The question landed like a stone. Emma's mouth went dry. Because you were about to take something that didn't belong to you. I wanted to stop you." Most children would pout or argue. Sophia only studied her, eyes narrowing. Then slowly, she smiled. "Nobody ever stops me." Emma felt a chill, yet beneath that smile she saw something fragile, something aching, a loneliness far heavier than any child should carry. That night, Emma tucked Sophia into bed. The girl resisted at first, demanding another story, another song, another game. But as Emma sat at the edge of the bed smoothing Sophia's hair, the fight drained from her. Within minutes, the child's breathing slowed. Her small hand curled trustingly around Emma's wrist. Something in Emma cracked open. She hadn't realized how long it had been since someone needed her like this. Not her ex-husband, not her mother drowning in hospital bills, not even herself. For the first time in years, she felt necessary. The following days unfolded like a strange dream. Mornings were cocoa and braiding Sophia's hair. Afternoons were math worksheets, ballet lessons in the mirrored room, whispered secrets when the house grew too quiet. Sophia tested her constantly. Little rebellions, sharp words, but beneath it was a hunger for attention that Emma couldn't ignore. At night, though, Emma felt the house breathe differently. Shadows grew thicker. Strange men came and went, murmuring in low voices down the marble halls. Doors locked, lights dimmed. She could feel the pulse of danger in the walls. And then there was Antonio. He was never far. Sometimes Emma found him at the edge of the garden, smoking in silence. Sometimes he lingered in the doorway during Sophia's piano practice, his gaze unreadable. Once, late at night, Emma caught him standing in the hallway outside Sophia's room, staring at the closed door as if it held the last piece of his soul. When their eyes met, he didn't speak. He only inclined his head, then walked away. But the silence between them began to thrum with something unspoken. Emma hated herself for noticing. For noticing the way his shirt sleeves rolled back to reveal strong forearms, the way his voice dipped when he gave orders, the way he softened, just barely, when Sophia laughed. She hated the heat that rose in her chest when he passed close enough for his cologne to linger. This was Antonio Romano, the Black King, a man whose hands were stained with power, whose enemies vanished like dust. And yet here she was, lying awake at night, her heart betraying her with every stolen thought. One evening, after Sophia had fallen asleep with her head against Emma's arm, Antonio appeared in the doorway. The hall light framed him in gold and shadow. "You've done well with her," he said quietly. Emma looked down at Sophia's sleeping face, brushing a strand of hair away. "She's just a little girl," she whispered back. His eyes lingered on the child, something raw flickering in them. "No," he said finally. "She's my daughter. That is never simple." The weight of his gaze shifted to Emma then, heavy, searching. The silence stretched until her breath came too fast, too shallow. Antonio's lips parted as if to say more, but he stopped. Instead, he stepped back, disappearing into the hall like a shadow retreating before dawn. Emma sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. She told herself it was fear. It had to be fear. But deep down, in the part of her soul she tried hardest to silence, she knew it wasn't. It was something far more dangerous. The Romano mansion had begun to feel less like a cage and more like a strange, uneasy rhythm. Emma woke with Sophia's footsteps padding into her room, spent mornings coaxing her into lessons, afternoons walking the gardens where the child's laughter briefly drowned out the heaviness pressing in from beyond the gates. But the illusion of normalcy shattered one grey afternoon. Emma was walking with Sophia through the rose garden when the first sound broke the calm, the distant growl of engines. More than one, too many. Sophia froze, her little hand tightening around Emma's. Moments later, voices rose from the front drive. Not the low, respectful tones Emma had grown accustomed to from the Romano men, but sharp, mocking laughter. A metallic clang followed, the gates rattling. "Emma," Sophia whispered, fear creeping into her usually steady voice. Emma's heart seized. She scooped the girl into her arms and hurried toward the side door, instincts overriding thought. The shouts grew louder, punctuated by the crack of something breaking. Wood, maybe glass. The estate, once untouchable, suddenly felt fragile. Inside, chaos erupted. Men in dark suits sprinted down the halls, weapons in hand. The air smelled of gun oil and adrenaline. One of them spotted Emma. "Take her upstairs," he barked, motioning to Sophia. "Now!" Emma obeyed, her pulse thundering. She carried Sophia up the sweeping staircase, ducking into the girl's bedroom. Locking the door felt useless, but it was all she had. She pressed Sophia to the floor, whispering, "Stay low. Don't move." Sophia's eyes were wide, shimmering with tears she refused to shed. "Is it them?" she whispered. "The ones who hate Daddy?" Emma's throat closed. She didn't know the answer, but she nodded anyway. The fear in the child's voice was too old, too familiar. A gunshot cracked from outside, sharp, echoing. Sophia flinched, burying her face against Emma's chest. Another shot, then shouting. The battle was at the gates now, spilling toward the mansion. Emma's body trembled, but something in her hardened. She couldn't run, she couldn't hide. She had to protect the girl. The door burst open without warning, and Emma nearly screamed until she saw Antonio fill the frame. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, his pistol gleaming in one hand. His chest heaved with controlled fury. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. His eyes swept over Sophia, then locked on Emma. "No," Emma said, voice shaking. But another gunshot exploded outside, closer now. Sophia whimpered. Antonio crossed the room in 2 strides, crouching to grip his daughter's face between his large hands. His voice softened, sharp edges melting for her alone. "You're safe, piccola mia, do you hear me? No one will touch you." Sophia nodded quickly, clinging to his arm. Antonio rose, his gaze flicking to Emma. For a moment she saw the storm in him, fury barely contained, violence straining at the leash. But beneath it was something else, fear, for his daughter, for the one person who tethered him to humanity. "Stay with her," he ordered Emma. His tone brooked no argument. "Do not let anyone through this door. If someone comes, you scream." Emma's chest tightened. "And you?" Antonio's jaw flexed. "I end this." And then he was gone, his footsteps pounding down the hall, a shadow of death moving toward the fire. Minutes stretched into hours. Or maybe it only felt that way. Emma held Sophia as the sounds of violence ebbed and surged beyond the walls. Engines revving, glass shattering, bursts of gunfire that made the child flinch every time. She whispered stories to distract her. Fairy tales, fragments of memory, anything to keep Sophia's small body from shaking apart in her arms. But Emma's own fear gnawed at her, cold and relentless. Finally, silence fell. The kind of silence that feels too heavy, too dangerous. Then the door opened again. Antonio stood there, his white shirt smeared with blood. Not his, Emma prayed. His face carved in stone. Behind him, his men dragged something down the hall, limp bodies leaving dark trails on polished marble. Emma's breath caught. She didn't want to look. She didn't want Sophia to see. But Sophia stood, small and defiant, stepping to her father. "Are they gone?" she asked. Antonio crouched again, his bloodied hand cupping her cheek with such tenderness it made Emma's chest ache. "They will never come near you again." His eyes lifted to Emma then, and for the first time, she saw cracks in his armor. Exhaustion, rage, the weight of a man who carried both kingdom and child on his shoulders. Later, when Sophia was asleep, Emma lingered in the hall. Antonio sat in the study, a half-empty glass of whiskey beside him, his pistol resting on the desk like another piece of silverware. He didn't look up when she entered. "Those men," Emma whispered. "Who were they?" Antonio swirled the whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. "Enemies. Old ones. New ones. They're always waiting outside the walls." "Because of you," she said before she could stop herself. His jaw tightened, but instead of fury he let out a bitter laugh. "Because of me." He looked at her then, eyes dark and raw. "That is why she must be protected. Always. Even from me, if necessary." Emma's breath caught at the admission. For a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them. The dangerous man and the woman who should fear him but didn't. Not the way she should. And as the night pressed close, Emma realized with a chill that she wasn't just entangled in his world. She was part of it now. The Romano mansion was quiet. Too quiet. Days had passed since the attack, but the silence wasn't peace. It was the hush that follows a storm, when the air is heavy and everyone waits for the next strike. Emma could feel it in her bones, in the way the guards doubled at the gates, in the way Sophia clung tighter at night whispering, "Don't leave me," in the way Antonio barely slept, prowling the halls like a predator, his phone always buzzing with news he never shared. Emma told herself she should leave. Every instinct screamed for escape, to pack her bag, slip through the back roads and disappear into anonymity. But every time she thought of walking away, her chest tightened. Sophia's laughter, her small hand curled in Emma's, and Antonio, the shadowed man who terrified her, and yet against all reason had begun to pull her heart closer. It was madness, and yet here she was. The breaking point came on a rain-soaked night. Emma found Antonio in the study, sitting at the long mahogany desk. A single lamp cast golden light across the room, catching in the glass of whiskey at his elbow. On the desk lay a pistol, sleek, black, silent in its menace. He sat staring at it as though it were a question he hadn't yet answered. Emma hovered in the doorway, her pulse loud in her ears. "You haven't slept." He didn't look up. "I don't sleep much." She stepped inside, closing the door softly. Her eyes drifted to the weapon. "Is that for them? The men who attacked?" "It's for everyone," Antonio said. His voice was low, heavy. "Enemies don't wait. They multiply. You kill one, 2 more rise. Always blood. Always the gun on the table. Emma swallowed. And Sophia? What happens to her if you keep fighting like this? That drew his eyes. Dark, fierce, wounded. That's why you're here. To give her what I cannot. Emma's chest ached. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth was written across his face. A man who had built a kingdom and lost his soul in the process, clinging only to the child who tethered him to life. She moved closer, almost against her will. You could walk away, Antonio, leave this all behind. He laughed, bitter and quiet. Men like me don't walk away. We only wait for the bullet with our name on it. The silence between them pulsed. Emma's breath came too fast, her heart betraying her. She should have stepped back. She should have put space between them. Instead, she whispered, "Then why keep me here? Why force me into this?" Antonio's gaze burned into her. He rose slowly, each step bringing him closer until the air between them was a thin, fragile thread. "Because my daughter needs you." His voice dropped lower, almost a confession. "And because I—" His jaw tightened. He couldn't say the rest. But Emma felt it in the way his hand brushed against hers, not quite holding, not quite letting go. Her chest tightened. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed. His face was inches from hers now, his breath warm, laced with whiskey. "But I can't stop." Neither could she. Their lips met, fierce and desperate, the kind of kiss born not of tenderness, but of survival, as if the world might end at any moment, and this was the only thing keeping them alive. When they broke apart, Emma's heart pounded with equal parts terror and desire. She knew then she could never go back to her old life, not after this. The decision came sooner than she expected. A phone call ripped through the night. Antonio answered, his voice sharp in Italian. Emma caught only fragments: betrayal, ambush, names that meant nothing to her but made his face harden. When he hung up, he grabbed the pistol from the desk and turned to her. "They're coming," he said. Emma's blood ran cold. "Who?" "Everyone who wants to see me buried." He reached for her arm, pulling her close. "Take Sophia. Go to the safe room. Do not open the door unless it's me." She shook her head violently. "Antonio, go!" His shout cracked through the room like thunder, but his eyes, God, his eyes begged her to understand. Emma ran. She found Sophia already awake, trembling in her bed, eyes wide with terror. Emma scooped her into her arms, whispering reassurances she barely believed herself. Down the hall, down the stairs, into the hidden corridor behind the kitchen. The safe room was a steel cage disguised as a cellar. Emma locked the door, pressing Sophia against her chest. The child's tears soaked through her shirt. Outside, the world erupted. Gunfire, shouts, the thud of boots. The war had come to their doorstep again. Emma held Sophia tighter, rocking her, whispering, "It's okay, baby. I've got you. I won't let anything happen." But in her heart she wasn't sure. Hours later, or maybe only minutes, the noise faded. The silence was worse. Then, footsteps, slow, heavy, a key scraping in the lock. The door opened. Antonio stood there, battered, bloodied, but alive. His chest heaved, his pistol hung limp at his side. For a moment he just stared at them, his daughter clinging to Emma, Emma holding her like she was her own. He crossed the threshold and sank to his knees beside them. Sophia threw herself into his arms, sobbing. Antonio held her tight, his eyes never leaving Emma. There was no crown on his head, no power in his posture, just a man stripped bare by love and violence. "You should go," he whispered hoarsely to Emma, "before this world eats you alive." Emma's throat closed. She knew he was right. She should run. She should take Sophia and vanish. But Sophia clung to her, crying, "Don't leave, Emma. Please don't leave." And when Emma met Antonio's gaze, dark, broken, silently pleading, she knew the truth. She wasn't leaving. Not now. Not ever. Whatever came next, she was already his.